afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Office of Multicultural and International Student Affairs and the Multicultural Advisory Board, I'd like to welcome you to FMU's International Holocaust Remembrance Day program. The Office of Multicultural and International Student Affairs provides leadership in the university's effort to provide students, inform the campus community of the values of multiculturalism, and assist in encouraging a campus environment that is committed to diverse student learning. The purpose of the office is to amplify the academic, social, and cultural development of students, as well as plan and implement programs that facilitate opportunities for self-expression and cultural harmony. Activities including lectures, forums, cultural, social, and other events are open to faculty, staff, and students. Today's program will highlight several aspects of the Holocaust tragedy and its impact on the world. In our attempt to increase cultural awareness in our campus community, we hope that today's event will foster inquiry into contemporary issues raised by the study of the Holocaust, worldwide genocides, and human rights. The Multicultural Advisory Board, made up of faculty, staff, and students, has been very instrumental in ensuring that programs such as these are implemented at Marion University. At this time, I'd like for the Multicultural Advisory Board to please stand and be acknowledged. Thank you.
Hello. What was the Holocaust? It was the execution of about 11 million people, 6 million of which were Jewish, by the Nazi regime. The Nazis also targeted gypsies, homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the disabled. Adolf Hitler. It all started with this man and his idea that Germans were superior over the Jews. Yet some people still try to deny that the Holocaust ever happened. Try and explain that to the people who lost their lives and their families. A lot of people wonder, were children killed in the Holocaust? And the answer is about 1.5 million. Yet it all started out so simple. First were boycotts of Jewish-owned businesses. Jewish people were stripped of their citizenship. They soon were not allowed to go to parks, hold government jobs, and doctors were not allowed to perform on Jewish patients. Jewish people were also forced to wear the yellow Star of David so they could be easily recognized. Jews were soon arrested for no reason and sent off to concentration camps, extermination camps, labor camps, prison of war camps, and transit camps. Yet the Jewish people did not give up without a fight. In the 1940s Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the Jewish prisoners were able to put up a fight against the Nazi regime for 28 days. Yet their efforts weren't enough, and the Holocaust lasted for 2 more years, totaling 12 years from 1933 to 1945 of torture and hardships for all the victims of the Holocaust.
December of '06, I received a letter. I opened it up and the first sentence said, "I would like to offer the Holocaust Museum a chance to review some World War II era photographs in my possession." Beginning in mid-January, a bubble wrap package arrives on my desk and I open it up and the first page says 21 June, Auschwitz. And so that was the point where we knew we might have something here. Many people think that they have photographs of Auschwitz, and very few people actually do. Because of all the overwhelming evidence of what we know was going on in Auschwitz, it kind of makes it even more chilling that they were having so much fun doing it.
It would be nice to figure out at some point is who these women are, if these are wives.
Can we look at this page here?
There's relatively little material that was taken in Auschwitz other than mugshots. The most famous are the large collection of photographs documenting the deportation of Hungarian Jews in May 1944.
And these are specifically the officers who were in charge of that deportation, who were in charge of the arrival of 437,000 Hungarian Jews in a span of 55 days, of which the vast majority of them did not survive. These are the men who did it.
The importance of finding out who the original owner was vital to authenticate the artifact itself and also to locate it in time and place.
In the album, only 3 people are actually identified by name in the captions. Mengele I knew on sight, but others we needed to look at lapels, we needed to look at where they were standing, what their uniforms looked like, what event this might possibly be, to determine who they were.
We notice that it's the same person who appears over and over in almost every single photograph. And he often will caption photos as me with so-and-so, but he never identified himself by name.
He was seen frequently in the presence of someone of higher rank. And we also knew from the photograph album that both men were promoted to different ranks on June 21st, 1944. Here's the listing of Karl Herke's name. You can see by the notation of his rank and the date of promotion, June 21st, 1944, as indicated in the photo album.
One of the 2 was Karl Hooker, who was the adjutant to the commandant. And then the light bulbs went off and we said, oh, it would make sense that he would be always standing next to the commandant. And we noticed that in a number of pictures he has an adjutant cord, which is a cord that you wear over your shoulder, which really clinched the identification.
Karl Hooker was an Obersturmführer. He was a career concentration camp officer. He went to Auschwitz in 1944. It was a fairly big deal to establish that it was Karl Hooker's album because of his proximity to power was extreme.
Auschwitz wasn't just a series of concentration camps, it was also a German community. And the fact that you have this resort.
Solothurn was the SS retreat, and it was within the grounds of Auschwitz. That people go on vacation is not a surprise, that they felt a need to build a retreat where SS personnel can frolic at the same time that they were murdering the Jews of Europe, and to build it as part of the same complex is an amazing thing.
There's one photograph, it's a sing-along picture, and along the bottom are 7 of the highest-ranking officers in Auschwitz, just leaning back, smiling, while the men behind them sing. Hooker is there, Otto Moll, the supervisor of the gas chambers, and Hirsch and Bayer, and Kramer, and Franz Hessler, who is the head of the women's camp in Birkenau, and Mengele. To have them all together is such a rare photograph, and then to have them enjoying themselves all together, it's really frightening.
Here we have a case where people that we investigate and research, all of a sudden we're seeing them, in some cases for the first time.
There are the photographs of the Helferreited of the female auxiliaries that came.
And they were female auxiliary officers who worked the telecommunications between Auschwitz and Berlin and Auschwitz and the other camps.
They're young and they're out for a good time.
And there's a series of 6 photographs where Hooker is handing out blueberries, bowls of blueberries at Solothurn.
And one young girl is pretending to cry. No more blueberries. And she's making mock tears.
This is at a time when Elie Wiesel and Primo Levi and so many other Holocaust surviving victims were in part of the Auschwitz complex.
The last series of photographs that are in the album are ones of a funeral of, it's called, of a terror attack.
And Terrorangriff, terror attack underneath, that was the Nazi code language for bombing.
There's a color guard. There's a parade for these men. There are women and children there mourning them with flag-draped coffins. This was 3 weeks before the end. It tells us they still hadn't come to grips with the fact that it was over.
We all know that monsters do monstrous things. But when you see people who look like they're nice guys in a fairly benign setting, and we know for a fact that they were doing monstrous things, then it raises all sorts of questions about what's man's capacity for evil. In a different setting, would they still be monsters?
Where they were all too frighteningly human.
It makes you think about how people could come to this. That they don't look like monsters. They look like me. They look like my next door neighbor. Is he capable of that? Am I?
What we wanted to do is read a few bios for you from people who were actually involved in the Holocaust, were in the Holocaust, or perished in the Holocaust. And we are going to read some bios from the little cards that you picked up out front. The first one, I'm going to read the first one, and the woman that I'm reading to you about is Herto Kreiger. She was born in Munich, Germany in 1921. Herta's Viennese mother and Polish-born father owned a successful men's clothing business in Munich when Herta was born. After Hitler's anti-Semitic Nazi party attempted to overthrow the German government in November 1923, the Jewish Shire family moved to Vienna, where Herta's grandparents lived. During the years between 1933 and 1939, when Herta would have been 12 to 18 years old, hiking was one of her favorite activities. She belonged to the Zionist youth group called Gordonia, and at their meetings, the members spoke about creating a Jewish homeland in Palestine. After the Germans annexed Austria in 1938, Herta's parents decided it was better to leave, and they were smuggled illegally via the Netherlands into Brussels. During the years 1940 to 1941, when Herta would have been 19 to 21 years old, the Germans occupied Belgium in 1940. In 1941, Herta married Herto Kreiger, but in 1942, he was ordered to report for labor in the East. Later, she heard about a meeting where she might find out where Schrulich had been sent, but it was a trick. She was arrested and deported. On the train, she wrote a letter to her parents. She wrote on the envelope, "To whoever finds this, maybe you have a son in the war and will understand the feelings of parents wanting to hear from their child." She tossed the letter from the cattle car. Herta sent just one postcard from Auschwitz. She used veiled language and wrote, and I quote, "Unexpectedly, I met your mother here." This implied that she had met with death. Herta perished at Auschwitz.
Ben Stern was born to Jewish parents in Warsaw. When Ben was 7, his family moved to Mogielnica, about 40 miles from Warsaw. Ben's father spent much of his time studying religious texts, and his wife managed a family liquor store. Ben attended public school during the day and was tutored in religious studies in the evening. After attending school in Warsaw, this is a quote from Ben. "After attending school in Warsaw, I returned home to help in our liquor store. One day there was a mass demonstration in town. People chanted, 'Don't buy from the Jews.' Our Christian neighbor said the priest encouraged this in his sermon. I was afraid I'd be seized for forced labor when Germany invaded Poland in September of 1939. My family agreed that I should leave town. so I boarded a train bound for Soviet-occupied Poland. In July of 1942, I was deported from the Warsaw Ghetto to the Majdanek concentration camp. There I was assigned to wash potatoes. When my legs became badly swollen, I had to go to the hospital, even though sick prisoners were the first to be killed. But the SS man assigned to the kitchen protected me for 2 weeks, and I recovered. Later, the same SS man caught another prisoner stealing turnips. Enraged, he took a pitchfork and drove it into the prisoner's throat, killing him. Then he ordered me to clean up the mess. Ben Stern was one of the few survivors of a forced march from Buchenwald to the Tyrolean Mountains near the Austrian border. He was liberated by the United States Army on May 3rd of 1945.
Sabina Sackbort. Sabina grew up in a Jewish family in Piotrkow-Trabowski, a small industrial city southeast of Warsaw. Her family lived in a non-Jewish neighborhood. Her father was a businessman, and her mother was a teacher. Both Yiddish and Polish was spoken in their home. In 1929, Sabina began public school and later went to study at a Jewish secondary school. These are her words. On September 1939, Jewish invaded Poland. 4 days later, German troops streamed into our city. After 1 month of occupation, my father had to give up his business. I had to give up school, and our family of 5 was forced into a ghetto that had been set up by the Germans. We shared an apartment with another family. From blocks away, we could hear the sound of German patrols and heavy German boots on the cobblestone. In 1942, as the ghetto had been liquidated by my Polish girlfriends, Danta and Maria got my sister and me fake Polish IDs. On the eve of the final roundup, we escaped and hid in their home. 2 weeks later, my sister and I took labor assignments in Germany where nobody knew us. I was a maid in a hotel for German officers. One of them asked me whether there was Jewish in my family. He said that he was an anthropologist and that by my ears and profile seemed Jewish. I looked offended and continued to work. Sabina was liberated in Regensburg, Germany by American troops on April 27, 1945. She immigrated to the United States in 1950 and pursued a career of an anthropologist.
Mario Finzi, born Bologna, Italy, 1913. Mario was the only child of a Jewish couple who were secondary school teachers in Bologna. Like many Italian Jews, his family was well integrated into Italian society. Even though fascist leader Benito Mussolini came to power in 1922, Jews in Italy continued to live in safety. Mario played piano as a hobby. When he finished high school in Bologna, Mario went on to study law. In 1938, Mario began practicing law in Milan, but later that year, Mussolini's government issued racial laws that prevented Mario from continuing his practice. Mario moved to Paris and began a new career as a pianist. In August 1939, he returned to Italy to renew his visa. On September 1st, while he was there, Germany invaded Poland, and 2 days later, France declared war on Germany. Mario was detained in Italy. In 1940-1944, Mario worked in Bologna with a Jewish service agency helping refugees. In July 1943, Mussolini was overthrown and German forces occupied Italy. The Jews in Bologna were sent to German transit camp at Fossoli di Capri. For some, the destination of transports out of Fossoli di Capri was not a secret. Auschwitz had been written in chalk on one of the railway's cars. In March 1944, Mario was deported to Auschwitz. In Auschwitz, Mario threw himself on a high-tension wire that surrounded the camp. He left behind a message for his parents, asking for their forgiveness. Mario was 31 years old.
Ask for your forgiveness. I have a cold, so my voice isn't 100% right now, so please bear with me. We begin with silence. The silence of death, the silence after destruction. There are times when songs falter, when darkness fills life, when martyrdom becomes a constellation of faith against the unrelieved black of space around us. There are no words to reach beyond the edge of night, no messenger to tell the full tale. There is only silence, the silence of Job, the silence of the 6 million, the silence of memory. Let us remember them as we link our silences. We're going to pause for a moment of silence. Silence does not bring to a standstill words and noise. Silence is more than the temporary renunciation of speech. It is a door opening before prayer toward the very realms of the spirit and the heart. Silence is the beginning of a reckoning of the soul, the prelude of an account of the past and the consideration of the present. May our shared silence lead us to awareness of a time of total evil that degraded our most precious values, the very meaning of religious existence and life itself. Our silence is to be a committed accounting for other silences that accepted persecutions and were indifferent to debasement and crime. For there was a time when silence was a crime. We think particularly of one night of silence more than half a century ago, Kristallnacht, the night of broken crystals or broken glass. The 9th of November, 1938. Then, nearly all the synagogues in Germany rose up in flame and smoke to the skies. On a side note here, the town that my grandfather grew up in Germany, they lived, the synagogue was kind of like in a downtown area, so the buildings were connected, and he lived in an apartment above the synagogue. And the only reason that his synagogue was not burned down is because the business next to the synagogue that adjoined it was not owned by Jews. It was a Christian business, and so that's the only reason that that building was not set on fire. The churches next to the businesses stood in darkness and in silence. Glass littered the streets, the broken shop windows of the Jewish community. The neighbors walked upon the crunching splinters and were silent. A few prayed. Some churches courageously expressed their grief, but a dark cloud of silence filled the world. When will that silence end? When will we speak out on behalf of suffering neighbors? Not only did Jews die, caught in the eddies and swirls of the Holocaust, millions of Poles and Gypsies, Russians, and other Europeans also ended their lives as victims of Nazism's diabolically efficient technology of death. But to be Jewish in Nazi Europe itself, of itself meant alienation and death.
Martin Niemöller, a pastor in the German Confessing Church, spent 8.5 years in a concentration camp. He wrote, "First they came for the communists, and I did not speak out because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me."
Pope John Paul II, a pope who knew well the heels of the Nazi inhumanity, prayed during his pilgrimage in Auschwitz in 1979. I keep before all inscriptions that come one after another, the memory of the victims in Auschwitz. In particular, I pause with you, dear participants in this encounter, before the inscription in Hebrew. The inscription awakens the memory of the people whose sons and daughters were intended for a total extermination. These people draw its origins from Abraham, our father, in faith, as was expressed by Paul of Tarsus. The very people who receive from God the commandment that thou shalt not kill itself experiences in a special measure which is meant by killing. It is not permissible for anyone to pass this inscription with indifference.
Who among us can be certain that if we were in the wrong place at the wrong time, we too might cooperate with the forces of evil. Are we in some way doing exactly that by our subtle racism, our lack of interest in war-torn nations around the world, our deliberate ignorance of genocide that some people are experiencing as we sit here this very moment? We cannot remain silent in view of the horror of the Holocaust, and yet we must choose our words carefully. We must not over-sentimentalize the tragedy. We must not treat it with irreverence. How then are we to speak out? Rabbi Irving Greenberg has given us this guide. Let us offer then as a working principle the following. No statement, theological or otherwise, should be made that would not be credible in the presence of burning children. There are times also for silence. Silence in the face of the awesome proportions of the tragedy of the Holocaust. We arrive again at such a time. We will light each of these candles to represent 1 million Jewish dead, the totality symbolizing all those who died in the Holocaust. When the candles are lit, the lights will go out for a couple of moments while we offer our own thoughts or prayers. Zichronam livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. Let us pause now and remember the victims.
On behalf of the Office of Multicultural Affairs and the Multicultural Advisory Board, I'd like to thank you for attending today. And I hope that as we leave and we go forward, we remember what we've heard and what we've learned, and that we will speak up for one another and be kind to one another.